was abrupt.
Here we go. Hi, I'm Christopher Scott Satterwhite. Welcome to our weekly discussion series, Race in the Community. For those who are joining us for the first time, our discussion is roughly 1 hour long. The speaker and I will talk and have occasional interactive polls for you to participate from home. We also have a moderated Q&A section, which should be at the bottom of your screen. If you have questions, please type them in the box and ask away. We'll try our best to get to all of them. If we don't, during the discussion, we'll send out a frequently asked questions to participants and hopefully answer those important questions you wanted answered. So far, we've been able to answer them, most of them during the session, but feel free to send them away. Now, I would like to welcome our guest, Indigo Lett, to Race in the Community. Indigo Lett is a transgender activist based here in Northwest Florida. Like most of our guests, Indigo is a graduate of the University of West Florida. They're active with the local transgender organization Strive, who has fought for the rights of the transgender community in this area for years and has been active, and Indigo has been active with the Pensacola Women's March as well. I'm beyond happy to have Indigo, my good friend, here today for our discussions and thank them for joining us today. So on behalf of me and everyone else here, thank you, Indigo.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So my first question is a basic one. What pronouns do you use?
Okay. I am switching from she, her pronouns, and I'm going to be starting to use they, them pronouns.
Yeah.
We still use she, her, but for me, they, them fits more with how I feel. So they, them pronouns are preferred.
All right. So why is this an important question? Not just for trans folks, but for everyone.
I think it's very validating for a trans person or for anyone. I mean, if you are someone and you feel like you have pronouns that are to you and someone invalidates that, that kind of feels like it invalidates you in a sense. And so for the trans community, one of the first things I say is really when you start to come into the trans community, you're your own activist in a sense, because there's a lot of people who aren't who may not know a trans person or may not know anybody from the community. And so having a pronoun or having to start with pronouns is just, it's a more respectful way of respecting someone when starting a conversation or when you first know someone. So I think
acknowledging their existence.
Yeah, acknowledging their existence. Yeah.
As they see themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, this is a good place for our first poll. Anna, would you mind putting up the first one for us? All right, so this is a question for you, for the audience out here. And these questions were selected by Indigo. What does the A stand for in LGBTQIA? Is it asexual? Oh, don't answer. Is it asexual, ally, American, or allyship?
We can't vote. Me and you, Scott, we can't vote on this, so.
All right.
I would play that.
There, I don't see anybody
yeah.
clicking on it yet.
That Jeopardy music is going to be real.
Yeah. Da, na, na, na. You missed it during the music for those who didn't see it.
We were dancing. I was dancing. That music. I don't know who made it, but it was popping.
It was out there for the public domain. Whoever public domain is, that's who it was.
Public
domain. Hey Anna, can you? Is the poll active?
I just closed it.
Okay. Didn't see anything on there. So, oh, there we go. Now I can.
Okay. Look at that.
Looks like we got some. All right. So 27% or 27 people, 84% got the correct answer.
Wow.
Not American. But although Americans can fit into that A.
Yes.
All right. So this is a good place for us to talk about terminology. Now, I feel a lot of younger folks are much more familiar with the terminology surrounding the trans issues, or surrounding trans issues and the LGBTQIA communities. But are you up for a quick terminology 101 class for some of those who might not be familiar?
Sure, yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so with the LGBTQ, we usually LGBTQ plus, so we just make sure we cover everyone, but usually the longer one is LGBTQIA. So L is lesbian, obviously just two women sexually attracted. G is gay, we two men. Bisexual is, it's not what people think it is. It can just be two, it's two different genders, right? You are attracted to two different genders, but the two different genders could be of anything, so of anybody. So then transgender is, so I'm gonna stop right here because with transgender, it's, I think with the terms transgender and cisgender, a lot of people may, especially people who are called cis, they kind of get taken back and almost slightly offended by it. But it doesn't mean, it's not a really offensive word. It just, so I think trans and cis are Latin. So if you look at a river, right, cis would stay on the same side. Trans would would go across the water, travel across the water. So if you think about it in that way, cisgender is just being accepting of the gender that you already are, and then the gender that you're born as, and then transgender is transitioning to another gender that you feel more comfortable with. And so, and then queer is a very, I know that's going to be kind of confusing to some people. Queer is a very just as an umbrella term similar to transgender. It's a very, but it's a bigger umbrella. It just covers basically everybody. I is intersex, which is people who have uh, chromosome. I think it's, I want to say it's like XY, but I don't want to get into too many details with it. But like, it's just people who have hormonal imbalances and people who have other issues pertaining that as they're growing up. A problem with intersex people that tends to happen is their parents tend to try to give them, they may try to affect their surgery from and down below before they're even having this decision for themselves. And so we kind of advocate for the intersex person to be able to make that decision for themselves when they get of age. And so then you have asexual, which is at the end, which is what I represent, which are people who have little to no sexual attraction. That doesn't mean you can't have you can't have sex. It doesn't mean you can't have a relationship or anything like that. It just means that the person that you're in a relationship with, you're not having a sexual attraction with. But then also there's romantic attraction as well, where you could be maybe homo-romantic or hetero-romantic or bi-romantic or things like that. And then with asexuals as well, there's different types of attractions. There's like aesthetic attraction. There's I'm trying to think of the other ones. There's like, I'm trying to think of this. There's more, but I'm just trying to remember my head right now. But there's more attractions than just sexual, and so romantic, aesthetic, and all that. And so that's basically the the terminology throughout all the letters.
Well, that actually ties in with the next question that I had for you. So there's a term that goes around a lot, especially over the past few years, but it's been around for, at least a decade or more than a decade, but the term intersectionality. So can you tell why, or talk about why this term, or first explain what the term intersectionality is for those who might not know, and then also talk about why specifically that's important for the Black Trans Lives Matter movement.
Yeah.
Along with the BLM movement and transgender communities as well.
Okay. So the term was it was created by Kimberly Crenshaw. I want to say it was like the mid 2000s, somewhere around there. There's a TED Talk. If you just look up intersectionality TED Talk, she's the first one. I guess that's the first resource we're going to bring tonight. But so the term intersectionality is basically it's weaving all the effects of how society has discriminated against you, but also all of what you are. So if you are, let's say you're white and you're a woman and you're gay, Those are three intersections that you have to deal with in your life.
Mhm.
And so each one of those, um, you can be discriminated against, and you have to kind of combat those on each level. The more intersections you have, the more discrimination you face on a day-to-day basis. So if you're like me and you are, you're Black, you're transgender, you're maybe uh, even I'm autistic, you can go down to like asexual, you can go down to, and I'm not disabled, but if you just keep on going, the
Mhm.
more intersections you have on you, the more things you have to combat in daily life. And so this is when we're talking about the marginalized people in our community. We don't just talk about the ones who uh, have just maybe one or two intersections or three. We're talking about people who have four or five, and they have to deal with, you know, things that most of us would never have to think about. And so we try to fight for them and try to fight for, try to address their issues, especially people who are like disabled and mentally have mental health issues and things like that, because we want to try to open up the world to them to make it easier on them so they won't have that intersection of themselves to be another thing that they have to combat, as well as all the other things they have to go through.
All right. Well, speaking of fighting and combating, you've been pretty active with this a pretty awesome organization, Strive.
Yeah.
You've been active with them for a long time, and it's a local organization, does incredible work around the community, everything from organizing protests, and not just transgender issues as well, but lots and lots of issues.
Yeah.
Organizing protests to housing those who need a roof over their heads. So, what has your time with Strive? What has that taught you?
Oh man, it's taught me so much. And I really want to thank Devin for getting me to join, because at the time we had a transitional period where a few of our the board just quit, and it wasn't a bad thing. It was just their time had come. Like they just were um, it just seemed like it was time for them to like hand over the reins, and so Devin was handed the reins, and they kind of go not go to me, but like kind of like, hey, you really want to do the secretary thing? Because I have no one right now to like help out with what's going on, because we've lost the majority of our board.
Yeah, and
And
that kind of stuff's
so
hard to step in for a board.
yeah, they stepped on for. I mean, they stepped in. I mean, they've gone above and beyond what I could have done in that situation. But and so I've been the secretary of Strive, and so what I've learned is I think the main important thing is persistence, but then also learning how to tap into your anger, learning how to tap into it, and not and be okay with being the bad guy, who you may be perceived as the bad guy.
Yeah,
Because a
so
lot of times,
how do you mean that?
so a lot of times people might think that because what you're representing and what you're trying to fight for, there's going to be somebody that's going to be against you, and there may be more people who may not, and it's not just against you as in like they're vehemently against you. They just may not understand what's going on because they lack, um, they just lack the knowledge of what transgender people are and what we who we are, and what our organization does anyway. And so having a situation where we I'm trying to think, I lost my train of thought. Sorry. um Trying to think. But yeah, what?
Being the bad guy.
Being a bad guy. So, understanding like you're gonna be, you're not gonna be liked. Sometimes you're gonna, like, our organization is literally like socialist trans initiative. Like that word right there, literally socialist, throws everyone, it always throws everyone like for a loop, for a second. No matter how you may even agree with what we're saying, but because that word, it kind of gets people to um it gets people to think that like, oh, what they've been taught in school about socialism, or what they've been taught in school about that side, that part of the left, is very very negative, a lot of it. And so we're here to like show you that there's positives to that, and the fight for the working class. And also that too, like that, it taught me about understanding that it's being comfortable with being somebody that may not be liked.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to still learn that because I try to like balance that out. You know, I'm just one of the one who tries to balance being liked, but like
It's
I
hard to imagine that with you, though. I mean, you're probably one of the more likable people I
yeah,
know.
exactly. So it's kind of hard for me to do that. but but another thing was like, you know, I had a very askew just to be honest here, I had like an off view about homeless people when I was younger because I was always thought in my head like you don't want to be where they are, right? You don't want to be on the streets struggling and stuff like that. So you need to like achieve and do great things, or you know, just try to have a job and everything. But for me, it's more about now I understand through working with Strive and being part of um, you know learning from Workers World Party and Party for Socialism and Liberation, like learning about I think I says it's too quiet or something, but anyway, so but yeah, learning about just about how they became homeless and then why has the system done them like they've done, you know what I'm saying? And so now understanding, I've gotten a bit more empathetic and I've now understanding about just the working class plight and then how can we help as an organization.
So, how did you get into activism then? How did you first get into activism?
Okay, so I want to say it begun where actually here at UWF.
Mhm.
So there was when I think is it called Spectrum now? I
Mhm.
think that's the group that the LGBTQ plus organization on campus. But originally they were the Gay Straight Alliance, and then they turned to Lambda Coalition, and so um, and so we were, and when we were in Lambda Coalition back in those days, like Devin was running that organization, and then so at the time, Strive was Strive was beginning to like change over at that time,
Mhm.
and so and then I started to get on panels because I was still figuring myself out as a trans person,
Mhm.
and then I slowly, just one panel here, a little spoken thing there. You know, I kind of had like special guest appearances in the beginning,
Uh-huh.
you know, and then,
Like now.
yeah, yeah, and then it just got to the point where it was like, I'm doing this stuff, I'm coming out of perspective, and I'm coming at this different perspective. And I was talking to my therapist, and she was like, you pretty much only you're black trans, at the time woman, and you have this perspective that none of your colleagues have, or none of your people have, and you have a voice that is definitely different and can come at this discussion from a different situation. And so I took it upon myself to go like, you know what, maybe I need to be more involved, or maybe I need to assist and help. And then that's when that transitional change happened with Strive. So and then they all came together at that point.
So it all began over here at the.
Yeah, it began here actually. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So, well, let's switch gears a little bit into a little more somber discussion. So, let's talk about the crisis of murders that are taking place against the Black trans community. Uh, Knowing that this year alone that there are possibly over 30 murders, probably more, of transgender folk, the majority of whom are Black, and that's just here in the U.S. As a larger community, what are asking the larger community, people that are out here listening right now or watching this on YouTube later, what are some of the ways people watching this right now? What are some things that they can do to help protect the Black trans community?
Okay. I think a big one is to start beginning to combat toxic masculinity. I think that's one of the biggest issues that we're having. And yes, I think we hit over 30 last week.
Mhm.
So we're like 30, 32, somewhere around there, unfortunately, with the majority of them being Black trans women. And so I think within all communities, but it's a big thing in the Black community with just masculinity being such a, I'm sure Black and Latinx people can kind of relate, where it's like this very rigid gender gender construct that's in the communities. And so, men do this, women do that, you dress like this, you act like that. And there are beginning to be, with, I would say, the millennial generation and Gen Z especially, there's starting to be variations. You're starting to see people, young Black men start to dress a bit more femininely, or just in there, and they're still, heterosexual men, but they just feel like this is how I like to dress and stuff like that. So it's breaking little bit by little bit, but I think one of the biggest things is to begin to question ourselves on how we look at masculinity and how we look at femininity. And so, in knowing that when you look at femininity as weak, you're actually discriminating against just cis women in general at that point, because you're now saying that they don't have as much value as men when they actually do, you know what I'm saying? And so it's good to actually, to put both of them on equal ground, and to say that, talk at the masculinity in our communities needs to be, we need to let our men to be able to express themselves a lot more. If they want to cry, let them cry. If they want to, have a moment, if they, whatever they need, to let them be able to express themselves a bit more. And if it looks a bit, whatever it is, it's okay. And for women, obviously, if they want to present more masculinely, and they want to, in that way. So not to have, just to kind of to break the rigid gender norms, and to be able to like have that. And then just also education. I think learning about intersectionality is a good one, obviously. And just, if watching more media that has, trans people in it. One good thing is like Pose. Pose is a Pose on FX. Very good show. It's going to be about something we're going to talk about a little bit later, so I'm going to stop right there. So I'm actually probably should stop right there on that. But like, just understanding our roles in our society with masculinity and femininity, and knowing that there's, um, just a thought outside of it with non-binary. And so, which is, I forgot about that term. So, so we're non-binary is outside of the two genders, so the other side of the masculine and feminine gender. So, and so some people have no gender at all. Some people have maybe half of one and none at all. There's a bunch of variations when it comes to non-binary. And so, but just know it's outside of masculine and femininity. And so, as I think as the generations, millennials and Gen Z, and I think it's now Gen A, that are going to grow up, as we start expressing ourselves, hopefully we'll start breaking out of that, that rigid gender structure we once had.
Well, a few months ago, back in June, at the height of the protests that were taking place over the summer, the protests that began with the murder of George Floyd, we saw thousands of people across the country, in particular in New York, but a number of other cities throughout the country, had taken to the streets for the largest Black Trans Lives Matter protest in history, and maybe the largest solidarity protest for the transgender community in history, honestly. So how do you feel, or how did you feel when you first saw these protests unfold?
I mean, just hearing people, like, just watching New York and just seeing, like, that had to be like over some thousands of people in the crowd going, Black Trans Lives Matter, and just saying that out loud.
Yeah, tons of people too. I mean,
it was very, because I guess it's New York, it was very echoey. So it just sounded cool, because it sounded like more than 1,000 something people said it, and it was really beautiful, because like I've never seen that before. Previous years, you didn't, we would have, issues of, people coming out and fighting for police brutality and against, just discrimination at the workplace or wherever, when it came to racial issues. But like, nothing to that extent. And it was just amazing to see so many people come out and, scream our names and say, trying to fight for us, and all the signs and stuff like that. And so, I hope to see more of that next year. I think no matter what happens in November 3rd, I think I want to see more of that, because there's going to be, unfortunately, more situations that's going to happen with trans people. So I want to see more, more people who stand up for us when we're not around, and wherever your job or, at the Thanksgiving table, Christmas, around your buddies, when you're playing video games, wherever you are, if you hear any type of transphobic language or homophobic or any type of discriminating language, just be would be amazing to speak up for us when we're not there, so you can educate people on like, hey, that's not the right thing to say, and you should be saying this. And so,
So what kind of larger effect do you think that has?
I think the larger effect, the daily stuff, the day-to-day stuff, I think it really has a larger effect. Because I remember, I I know I'm not that old technically, but I'm 35. But like, it. I remember in the early 2000s and late 90s, the word gay was just such a word we all used, and it was just something like, oh, that's gay, or we would always use it, and not knowing that we were being, very insulting to the gay community.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I remember around the late 2000s, people would still use that word in more derogatory ways, and like people were getting attacked for that. They were like, just, immediately like, that's not right, you shouldn't say that. And I was like, wow, and so, you don't have to go like super attack dog on people, but like, tell them like, hey, that's not right, or actually, do what you need to do. If that's how they take it, that's how they take it, actually, to be honest with you. Because like some people need that type of, some people need somebody to get in your face. I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, the day-to-day stuff matters, because a lot of times a lot of people subconsciously do stuff because that's all they know. And so when they're taught a different way, they can be, somewhat enlightened on what's actually happening. And so they're better able to be more open-minded about the world around them.
Yeah.
So I think that helps. And that helps the workplace, especially. That where it helps the schools, especially around here. So people could treat people with better respect and not have so much discrimination. And so people can feel, the people who are marginalized can feel more safe. That's the most important thing. We can feel more safe going into areas and spaces where there's more people that are not us, because we know if something happens to us, somebody will stand up for us. And I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah. And that can go in a lot of different directions too. When somebody says the wrong pronoun about somebody, and that person goes by another pronoun, then speak up and say something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's the minimal, the minimal that you can do. Yeah, so with the recent protests over here in just Pensacola, but also nationwide, do you feel that the Black trans community, I should say communities, plural, have been represented well within the larger Black Lives Matter movement?
I mean, be honest with you, like, yeah, I feel like yeah and no. So like a part of it is, I mean, Black Lives Matter was created by 3 queer women. So already off the bat, they're definitely on our team in a sense.
And that's a fact that a lot of people forget too.
A lot of people forget it was 3 queer women that started that movement. And so there's this, I think there's this bigger, thought process of like, every time there's a police brutality incident, we got to go in there. And then that, is the Black Lives Matter movement. That's just it. And so I don't think that's just it. I think it's also whenever, queer people get hurt or killed, or trans people get hurt or killed, I think they're there as well. I just think sometimes maybe there can be this weird like hierarchy that can happen, where people who are, maybe just, cis and heterosexual kind of get a bit more attention than the people who are more marginalized in the community at times, just because you kind of feel, as a trans person, you do kind of feel left out sometimes of some discussions at times and stuff like that. Because I feel like if we can just include everyone, as a whole, as a community, then we can be much stronger. Like if you think, it's strong now, like if you combine the LGBT community and the Black Lives Matter community together and have them joint, like for real, and everybody respects each other across the board, it'd be unstoppable, like technically. And also the disabled people as well and mental health and everything like that. So, but there's kind of been this little weird hierarchy thing that's been going on, and it's not anybody's fault really. It's just how white supremacy has kind of we've had to fight so hard just against the police and had to fight so hard against just white supremacy in general, that sometimes trans issues and queer issues kind of get put back a bit because we're still fighting racism just by itself, just that we're still fighting that. And so it's kind of hard for people to balance those issues when it really doesn't really need to be a troubling balance and issue. It's just like, hey, we're here to help. We're Black too, we're here to help. It's just we have issues that don't pertain to that. Saying it's something else. And so we just need to have more discussions and coming together to understanding one another so we can combat all the issues together rather than have that split sometimes. That
Yeah, and that ties back into our discussion about intersectionality,
yeah,
and the recognition of this. So with the Black trans community as a whole, then, what are some of the issues that you feel that should be recognized that maybe are missed? That might be different than the trans community, the non-Black trans community.
I'm trying to. I mean, I was going to go back to toxic masculinity, but like it's back to like it's just more education on pronouns, more education on terms, and just understanding that the difference between like a drag queen and a trans person. Like a drag queen is someone who performs as a certain gender or whatever they perform as, but they go home and they may go to work as, so but as a trans person, that's 100% full time. They are that gender because that's how they feel. Trying to dispel certain myths about just I think sometimes too dispelling myths about I hate to use the word, but passing. So like passing is a term where a trans person who passes as they trying to think, for example, I don't know if y'all know Janet Mock, but that may not be a good answer. So if you were a trans person and you pass as cisgender, so like somebody won't know you're trans unless you told them, right? And so you just pass. And so there's a difference between passing and not passing and being okay with both. I think that's something that needs to be talked about. But mainly I feel just the more education on what we're talking about in the beginning and what we're talking about up to now, just about trans issues and, understanding more about the trans community as a whole, because there's still so many stereotypes and stuff that go on. I remember when I first started transitioning, it was like, all we saw was like, trans people on Jerry Springer, or trans people on like judge shows or Maury or whatever, and it would be like this shock that this person is dating this trans person, and oh my God, and that type of stuff needs to be dispelled, because like it's, and then because that gets people to think like, well, they didn't disclose who they were, so they deserved what they got. And there's so many people who will say stuff like that, and it's ugly.
Yeah.
And so we need to understand that like, no, they both were consenting adults, and everything was fine until I'm guessing somebody found out that person was dating a trans person and they got upset. And then usually, unfortunately, sometimes violence happens because of that. And so we need to also allow, just Black men or anybody that dates a trans person to be able to be okay with doing so. Like we need to be more open-minded to allowing that to happen, rather than shaming the trans person and shaming the either the cisgender person who is dating that person. And so that's something we need to also dispel.
All right.
We do have a couple questions.
Okay, questions.
So, let me read. This first one came in, I think initially through the chat. Now see it in the Q&A. So and I'm reading directly from this. This is from Jesse.
Okay.
Have you or your organization helped navigate barriers associated with the gender listed on a state-issued ID and voting?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, actually, that was our beginning type of thing. We would do classes. We haven't done one now, but we would do because now we still post it from time to time, which is FloridaNameChange.org.
Mhm.
And so we would before we had the transitional switch to what's Devin and now our generation, but
Mhm.
of Strive, the previous generation of Strive, they would do classes and we would have a person come in and they would talk about how to change your gender marker, how to change your the name,
Mhm.
and all that. And we would really have people come. Those would be our biggest meetings sometimes because we would have tons of people come in and be like, "Yeah, I want to change my name, I want to change my gender marker," and we would really help out those people when that happened. But now, I mean, I just we with COVID and everything, we haven't had a chance to do so. We haven't had a chance to do a lot of things we wanted to do this year. But yeah, FloridaNameChange.org is like the starting point for I would say anybody that wants to start the name change and the gender marker change.
And you said that's one of the things that that Strive has been working towards
Yeah.
since the
So that's
beginning.
one of the things we've always been, adding in. We would add that in when we post our minutes
Mhm.
from our meetings and stuff like that. We'd always be like, if anybody needs a name change, you know, we FloridaNameChange.org, and then we would try. We used to have somebody who would come in and work with people
Mhm.
to help them get their gender marker changed and the name change. But now I would actually say Ariel at Pensacola Osteopaths can actually
Oh,
help out
okay.
as well. So
Mhm.
that my job now. So so she can help with you with that now. So
Okay.
but yeah, that's one of the main things we would strive for. Right? Pun intended.
Well, I got another question here. This from Robin. In the churches, and I'm reading directly from this, I quote, in the churches where the congregation is mostly African American, there is a dividing line between acceptability of the LGBTQIA community, unless the community is a part of the choir or music area. How have you seen religion play in the acceptance, intersection, or partnership of the LGBTQIA person and issues?
Okay.
There's a big one here.
That is a good question.
All right,
Gee.
take us to
Uh,
church.
because it's a very, yeah, like she's like, I think it's she, right?
Yeah, Rob. Yeah.
Yeah. It is a very dividing issue because there's a religious issue and then there's a moral issue. So people will use religion to just discriminate against trans people by saying that you're not, of God or anything like that. But then there's like a moral issue as well, where people are just like, I mean, I get what you're doing, but I just don't, just they kind of have this like feeling of not, you know, um, understanding you and just don't want to try to.
Yeah.
I think it's that saying like, don't hate the sin, I forgot how it goes.
Uh,
Is it like, don't hate the
love,
sin, hate the
hate the
sinner?
sinner, love the sinner.
Yeah, something like that. And I'm just like, but like, but why don't you just love them entirely? Like, why don't you just love them? It's not a sin, but like, why don't you just fully love them as they are? But yeah, I haven't been to church myself in a long time. I've known some trans people who've gone to church, and they've had because their church was already kind of queer as it was at the time. They were better accepted, but I haven't met anybody who was just like the one queer or trans person in the church, or the few that were in there, and then they had to deal with, wanting to still, you know, not praise, but like still wanted to like be a part of Christianity or be a part of whatever religion they're part of, and then have to deal with the the congregation and the deacons and the pastors and stuff.
Mhm.
So for me, it is a very dividing line, and I think it depends on how. And this is why that's why I say, like, as a trans person, you're your own advocate, because you have to kind of have confidence to go in those situations and be like, this is me, this is who I am, and you're gonna have to take it or leave it, or I'm out the church. You know what I'm saying? I'm gone. And it's usually people, once you start being more confident, they start to, you know, they start to like understand you a bit better. Usually. Because sometimes they're still kind of combative, and that's where you're gonna have to make a decision. So
It's a big topic, not only with church,
I mean, that could be its own video, technically. With a whole panel, technically.
well, I've seen some, yeah, and it's not only just church, but it's also family too, because the family,
Exactly.
connected with that. Yeah. So, okay. Well, thanks. Thanks for answering that question.
Yeah.
I have. Let me see. Well, actually, I got a good place for another section here. We'll turn to history.
Okay.
So, for those who might be unfamiliar with the movement itself, I think a lot of the ideas around transgender issues have come to more prominence in the last decade. But of course, it stretches back much longer than for a pretty long time. So, where would you look at is the beginning of the modern trans movement?
I would say it would actually be with. I mean, people say Stonewall, but I actually would say it's the Compton cafeteria riots that happened in the 50s.
What is that again?
The Compton cafeteria riots.
Okay.
They happened in the 50s. It was like a short 2-day thing, but it was a big, incident at the time. I'm trying to think how it started. I think it was just people getting kicked out of the cafeteria, and it was a hot spot for trans community or just a queer community. And I think it had to do with police coming in and trying to kick them out, and they were tired of it, and they clashed at that cafeteria back then. Obviously, there's Stonewall. That's such a big incident. It was a club that was actually owned by the mob. And so, but they allowed trans people to be there. And then back then, you had to wear like, I think 3 or 4 articles of clothing that was actually what your gender was supposed to be, or the police would actually throw you in the back of the car or whatever. And so the police would often raid that Stonewall, and then one night they just they got tired of it and they fought back that night. And that was the big, I would say that was the big spark, where there was other little, riots that happened before that. That was the biggest spark to the movement. And then I would say I'm trying to think with the 70s, it was just kind of, you had Pride started around about, I think, the 70s. And so the Pride events started happening. And in the 80s, we obviously had the AIDS epidemic, and then gay and lesbian people kind of, at that point, unfortunately, they started to split apart from the trans community. And then the 90s was this period where it was kind of uncertainty. And then I think Ellen came out and a few others came out, and then it started to get, more traction. And then in the 2000s, you started having states allowing gay marriage, and that opening up. And then now we're still having issues with trans people in bathrooms in some states and trans people at workplaces in some states. And so we're still kind of fighting that battle. But the modern spark was the Stonewall movement. Yeah.
Yeah, which was didn't just have Black participants, but it was led by Black.
Yeah, it was led by Black participants and Latinx participants. 2 of the main ones was Marsha P. Johnson and Silva Rivera, who went on to make Star, which actually it's Star's 50th anniversary. The street transvestite, I'm trying to think, I forgot, street transvestite, something revolutionaries. My mind's so gone, I'm so sorry. But
You're fine.
Street transvestite action revolutionaries. Okay. So they basically were they're kind of like the parent to Strive, because they were trying to house and take care of trans people back then, and trying to clothe and feed and things like that. And so, if Strive has any group to look up to, it's the Star organization that happened in the 70s. So,
fantastic. Well, this is a good place for our next poll question. Anna, would you mind putting that up here? All right. So, in what 1980s dance, going all the way back to the 80s, what 1980s dance was made famous by Madonna, but created in New York City, in the New York City ballroom scene earlier that decade? Is it Vogue, the safety dance?
Oh my God, the safety dance.
The Cabbage Patch, or the Macarena? I picked the answers. You got the question. I got the answers. Let's see what we have here.
Leave your friends behind. Your friends don't dance, they don't dance, and no friends of mine. All right.
You got this.
Yeah, no, that's.
Gotta do the Macarena.
Yeah, oh my God, I can't speak Spanish, so like.
You know what?
Yeah.
All
Oh,
right,
look at that. Yeah, they're
yes, we have 77% got it right. Vogue. So we were going to do it during that little scene. Safety dance. No Cabbage Patch though. So
No,
Macarena. All right. So another question chosen by Indigo.
yeah.
So you have some good resources. I know for what are some books that people could turn to if they
Okay.
want to learn a little bit more.
Look at the old phone. Old phone. This phone's like a year old. Anyway, so we talked about Pose, which is about the ballroom scene actually in the 80s.
How
Paris
do you spell that too?
Pose, huh?
How do you spell that?
No, Pose.
Okay.
Pose. It's on FX.
Mhm.
I don't know if it's on any streaming sites, but you know, I'm sure it is. I think Netflix maybe, but um, then there's Paris is Burning, which is another movie about the ballroom scene, but it's like the real documentary of the ballroom scene.
Mhm.
And
Paris is Burning is a fantastic movie too.
oh, fantastic! It's, if you want to know more about the queer and trans community in the 80s, what they went through on a daily basis, and the language back then is going to be different. So, you know, fair warning, there's just going to be a different language, you know, compared to what we do now. It wasn't as there wasn't as much, not gonna say PC, but it wasn't as like check. It wasn't a check back then. Tangerine is a more common, or no more common, more modern film. I think it came out in the mid 2010. Shot on an iPhone. All of it shot on an iPhone. It was about these two women in LA and their daily life as they go through just their daily two sex workers that come out, you know, and they live their daily lives in LA and the trials and tribulations of that.
Oh, we did get a comment from Jill that said the Pose is on Netflix.
Oh, Pose is on Netflix. Oh, okay.
There you go.
And then you have Disclosure. That's on Netflix. I forgot to watch it that day. We do a Solidarity Sunday where we have a video where we're talking like this on Zoom. Or on Facebook. But the last two Solidarity Sundays ago, we showed Disclosure, which is basically this kind of documentary where all the trans people they've come together and talked about the current issues at the moment. Laverne Cox is in there, and among others. Books, Stonebush Blues, anything by Leslie Feinberg.
And I still have my copy. I still have your copy. So.
Yeah, you still have it. Anything by Leslie Feinberg, you're sure win. Anything, any of her works. She's amazing. Or they're amazing. I'm sorry. Redefining Realness is by Janet Mock. That is more of the Black trans woman experience. So if you want kind of her early life from when she was born all the way up to I think when she became a grown up, because the next book she makes is about her 20s. And so Redefining Realness by Janet Mock is another good one. I haven't read this one, but I want to read it. It's called Black on Both Sides by C. Riley Snorton, which is about being Black and trans and the struggles therein, things like that. Also, if you want a more of a kid's version or a kid's perspective version, there's I think there's a book called I Am Jazz.
Oh yeah.
Jazz Jennings. But that's the like if for like little kid. It was a picture book, that one. But
it's important to be able to just to be able to show.
She has Being Jazz, which is like her book. I think when she's grown, because she's grown up now. Which I'm like, I'm getting old because I remember her like as a 5-year-old. I'm like, but anyway. And then she had a show on TLC a while back, so I'm not sure if that's still playing, but yeah, and that TV show is called I Am Jazz. And then there's Transgender History by Susan Stryker.
Okay.
That one just basically about what we talked about just a little bit earlier about the history of transgender people, and that'll probably go way more in depth than I did today.
All right, great.
About that, yeah.
All right, cool. Well, and we can send these out to people too. So for those who weren't writing it down,
I know that was a lot. Yeah.
I think we have a couple questions here. So let me see some of these. Okay, this is from Jill also. Are there any parts of society in general and or Pensacola area maybe specifically where Black trans activists have found good, maybe even surprising allyship?
Um,
And actually, this might tie in with one of the other questions. Do you have or know of any kind of quote unquote safe lists of various local businesses, organizations, professionals that are supportive of trans people and
yeah,
other members of the LGBTQIA community?
yeah. I think yeah, they definitely tie in together. We actually at Strive are trying to make a list of resources
Mhm.
to that degree, technically, of like endocrinologists, doctors, therapists, and also we were trying for a long time to make businesses that were trans friendly, that people can go and just go and shop at or go, partake in their business at. We were trying to do, and we're hopefully, I think this would be the goal of Strive, and we can pull this off. Maybe next year, maybe another year, but we were trying to do a job fair. We
Mhm.
had it at one point, and then we started losing companies. But we were trying to do a job fair of like trans-friendly companies that people can go work at, and we're
Mhm.
getting help from Portis Institute. We're getting help from other places, but it didn't pan out. But I think mainly we're still kind of gathering those resources. So right now, I don't know of any like spots in town that are like, yeah, we're like, we're like
100%.
100% trans friendly here, 100%, we're 100% LGBTQ plus friendly there. Um, just trying to think of any places like that downtown. Obviously, you have some of the clubs like cabaret and stuff like that, but like um, but just like businesses in general, I can't really think of any
Mhm.
that would, I'm sure there are some, but like I said, we're still gathering resources on that.
Yeah, it means there's work to be done
Yeah,
still.
a lot of work still to be done on that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of work to be done, we have our last poll question here. So Anna, would you mind putting up this last one? How many homeless shelters in Pensacola will house transgender people if they become unhoused? Is it 0, 1, 2, or 3?
Unfortunately, there's no lifelines on this one, so you can't. Well, actually, you could technically.
You just call us.
You just
You know,
call,
you can call us on our phone.
yeah, I don't, you can't do 50-50.
You're not winning any money anyway, so who
Yeah.
cares?
You know.
All right. Are they still going, Anna? I don't see it on my side.
Woo, okay. This
Yeah.
one we are a bit off.
Yeah. Okay. So 30% of you got the correct answer.
Yeah.
Sadly, there are. Indigo, do you want to?
Yeah, sadly, there are 0 homeless shelters in Pensacola that will house transgender people. I mean, we would say favorite house was one, but that was like a special situation. There's a special situation with that one. So really, technically, there's 0.
Mhm.
So, um, and so what we do at Strive is we have a emergency housing program. And so right now, unfortunately, it's kind of hard because of COVID. Obviously, you don't want to take somebody in not knowing the situation about their health before they come in because you don't know if you can catch COVID or not. Um, but the year before and years before, we would basically have people in the community that would be willing to house people just in case there was an emergency. If somebody gets kicked out of their house, or they're just they're transitioning from place to place and they don't know, they're coming into Pensacola or into Florida and they don't know where to go or they don't know how to kind of start them, build themselves up. And so what we try to do is get them housed with someone until they can build themselves enough money to be able to move on. And or if it is not a house, we really try to post uh, what you call it, like not GoFundMe, but just like a donation drive to like help that person. Even we can get them in a hotel for a night, even that. So we just try to do our best to keep these people off the streets because when you're on the streets, we don't know what's going to happen to them. Either be other just people or police, and so we don't know. We don't trust that, and so we try our best to get these people housed, um, and try to keep them safe. So
Yeah. And this is something that, from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that the broader community can also help with.
yeah,
Too. That
definitely.
Strive is the organization that
Yeah,
that coordinates it, but there's a big list that
yeah,
Strive keeps to say, hey, can you would you mind watching or not watching somebody, but would you mind housing somebody for the night? They'll be passing through.
And we try to make sure that like both parties are like compatible. We don't be like, here's this person. We're like, okay,
Get ready.
You know what? Get ready. They coming right now. They're busting through the window. No, but we try to make sure that they like, hey, what allergies you have?
Yeah.
You know what the house is like. Do you have pet allergies? You know, is the person coming in with maybe a cold? Or, you know, we don't know. Like what can we do to help, you know, that the two parties out before they meet and house each other. We go through a vetting process. That's what I was trying to the word for it. We go through a vetting process that we try to you know, go through before these two people meet so they can have the best relationship they can before the person leaves.
Yeah, so if there's something that anybody out there wants to help with, I mean, that's definitely a really big part of what Strive does, and definitely something that would be, I'm sure, very, yeah, a lot of people will be very thankful, you know, for that kind of help. So Indigo, I have one more question for you. This is our end of the night hokey question for you. Hopefully it's not too hokey, but
yeah,
you know, sometimes you know, when we're looking out in the world, that there doesn't seem to be much hope out there, but got to find it to keep going. So what gives you hope?
What gave me hope is that question you asked earlier about the people that were screaming out Black Trans Lives Matter out in New York and other places and stuff like that. And what gives me hope as well is like, funny enough, it's like social media and Instagram and TikTok even, like there are so many young people who are like expressing themselves now. And they're
you know, I believe that children are the future.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. So I heard that one song. Yeah, that was Stevie Wonder. But I think it's Stevie Wonder. But yeah. So you know, I'm not saying the older generations are bad or anything. I just think because they didn't have that much representation, it's kind of hard for them to understand. But I think with the youth that can come, you know, that are expressing themselves more often, there's going to be more representation and we're starting to see it now. I mean,
yeah,
cartoons like Steven Universe and She-Ra and stuff like that have big queer representation in it. And so we're starting to see millennial creators and Gen Z creators begin to show more, you know, queer and trans people in things. And so hopefully with that, you'll start seeing movies with those themes. So for older generations and just for people in general, the thing of it is we need to make it more, I think the saying is like representation matters. So like the more representation there is of Black trans people and queer people, the more it becomes normalized and the more it becomes like, oh, this is just something we, you know, that we see and it's okay.
Yeah.
And it's safe. And so that helps the more marginalized people out with safety. So I think that will make people be like, you know, more apprehensive when people are discriminating against us and things like that. So that gives me hope.
Awesome. Well, that's a great way to end the interview. We had a couple other questions, but we're not going to have time to get to them. So we'll have to send those questions out to them.
Okay.
But Indigo, I really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And also I want to thank Greg Thompson for helping set up this whole program, and also Anna, who's working in the background with this, and also the departments that are a part of this, honors, the Office of Equity and Diversity, Continuing Education here in the English department as well. And lastly, I just want to say that we got a shout out today in the State of the University speech. So it's nice to see that today. So thank you for that. And otherwise, thank you everybody for joining us. And we'll be here next week. It'll be our last week next week, and that's with Hale Morissette.
For me next, you better get ready.
Yeah, it's a good one. Be a nice way to end the series. So.
Yeah, definitely. She's definitely a headliner. I don't blame you having them last. I'm sorry.
Well, you're our headliner, so.
All
right, well, I really appreciate you coming out here tonight. All right, thanks a lot. Okay, thank you, everybody.
you.